I declare open the second part of the International Conference on the Question of Jerusalem, Annexation and Practice, Palestinian Youth and Jerusalem, co-organized by the United Nations Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. Your Excellency, Mr. Fadi Hidmi, Minister for Jerusalem Affairs of the State of Palestine, Your Excellency Ambassador Sheikh Nyang, Permanent Representative of Senegal to the United Nations in New York and Chair of the United Nations Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People, Your Excellency Ambassador Riyad Mansour, representative of the State of Palestine, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, let me welcome our audience to the International Conference on the Question of Jerusalem under the theme Annexation and Practice, Palestinian Youth in Jerusalem, co-organized by the United Nations Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. I am Samir Pakir, Assistant Secretary General for Palestine and Al-Quds Affairs of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. I will be moderating today's virtual event. In the first part of this year's Jerusalem conference on 28th of July, speakers and participants drew attention to the various critical dimensions of the situation in the city after over 50 years of Israeli occupation and its associated policies and measures. They also discussed how Israel's entrenchment of its annexation plans, the rest of the occupied West Bank would jeopardize the centrality of Jerusalem as a final status issue in the Israel-Palestine conflict that must be justly resolved on the basis of international law and relevant United Nations resolutions. The chair summary and recording of the event can be found on the website of the United Nations Palestinian Rights Committee at www.un.org/UNICPAL. Today we are convening for the second part of the annual conference on Jerusalem, and it is my pleasure to welcome to this event our distinguished panelists, His Excellency Mr. Fadi Hidmi, Minister for Jerusalem Affairs of the State of Palestine, who will give a statement at the opening and has kindly agreed to continue participation in today's conference panel. Mr. Micha Kurz, co-founder of Breaking the Silence and Grassroots in Jerusalem, Ms. Reem Natsheh, Field Work Coordinator at the Palestinian Women's Center for Legal Aid and Counselling, and then Ms. Rochelle Watson, National Organizer at Friends of Sabeel North America. They will highlight the lived reality of young Palestinians and particularly young women in East Jerusalem under Israeli occupation and discuss ways to support Palestinian youth-based civil society while they grapple with daily challenges under the Israeli occupation. Before we get into the panel, allow me to give the floor to the representatives of the United Nations Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People and the State of Palestine for their opening remarks, and also make my remarks on behalf of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. I would like first to request Ambassador Sheikh Nyang, Permanent Representative of Senegal to the United Nations and Chairman of the UN Palestinian Rights Committee, to deliver his remarks. You have the floor, Excellency.
Ambassador Amir Bakr and dear moderator, thank you for giving me the floor. My warm greetings to you, to the moderators, to the participants, and I'm very happy to be here today and to have our two organizations, the OIC and our committee, to organize this very important event. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to part 2 of the International Conference on the Question of Jerusalem on the theme, quote, Annexation in Practice, Palestinian Youth in Jerusalem, unquote, co-organized by the Committee for the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People, which I represent today in the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. While these days the focus is on Israel's plans to annex Palestinian territory in the occupied West Bank, we must not forget, and let anyone else forget, that Israel has already annexed Palestinian land, and one of the most important parts of Palestinian territory is Jerusalem. This occurred de facto shortly after the 1967 war and the jure in 1980. Israel's measures to consolidate its unlawful annexation of Jerusalem and its surroundings continue to threaten the city's legal status, as well as its demographic composition and its historically multicultural and multi-religious character. Demolitions and seizures of Palestinian-owned structures in East Jerusalem and eviction of Palestinian families from their homes, pursuant to increasing lawsuits brought by Israeli settlers under the so-called absentee property law, are harming the prospect of a two-state solution. Other Israeli policies have negatively affected the Palestinians' ability to enjoy the services they are entitled to, further undermining their presence in the city and cutting off East Jerusalem, once the focus of political, commercial, religious, and cultural life for the Palestinian people from the West Bank. Despite Israel's successive unilateral actions, the committee's commitment to achieving a negotiated two-state solution remains resolute. Annexation constitutes a serious violation of international law and UN resolutions and would deal a devastating blow to the two-state solution and to peace in the Middle East. The committee will continue to support a peaceful and lasting resolution of the conflict on the basis of UN resolutions, international law, and bilateral agreements, and will continue to work to realize the vision of two states, Israel and Palestine, living side by side in peace and security within recognized borders on the basis of the 1967 lines and East Jerusalem as the capital of Palestine. On behalf of the committee, I call on the Middle East Quartet to find a mutually agreeable framework for the parties to re-engage with each other, to resuscitate a dialogue among all stakeholders with no preconditions and in the interest of peace and a negotiated resolution to the conflict. Following the recent announcement of its agreement with the United Arab Emirates to normalize the relations, Israel said it would, I quote, suspend declaring sovereignty, end quote, over areas of the occupied Palestinian territory, thus leaving the possibility open to future annexation. The committee reiterates that annexation of any part of the occupied territory is illegal, and that any initiative aimed at a just solution to the question of Palestine must foremost consider the legitimate aspirations of the Palestinian people, engage the Palestinian leadership, and be based on the two-state solution. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, young Palestinians and Israelis are increasingly making their voices heard through civil society action, and this panel aims at providing yet another platform for Palestinian youth in Jerusalem. A few weeks ago, the UN celebrated International Youth Day under the global theme, Youth Engagement for Global Action, as the cornerstones of this year's celebrations of the 75th anniversary of the founding of the United Nations, UN 75. Active engagement and empowerment of the post-Oslo generation is essential for the peaceful resolution of the conflict and an end to occupation. It is therefore essential to continue putting the spotlight on the lives of young Palestinians in East Jerusalem and in the rest of the OPT as they struggle to access opportunities and make their voices heard. The committee's mandated activities should continue to serve as platforms to bring together this diversity of voices from Palestine and Israel, particularly young women, and also from international ones, to shed light on the question of Palestine, of Jerusalem and Palestine as a whole, and as a global struggle for self-determination and a just and peaceful solution to occupation. I thank you, and I wish you all a fruitful discussion.
Thank you, Ambassador Nyang, for your statement. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation appreciates the cooperation with the United Nations Palestinian Rights Committee, exemplified by this year's 7th annual conference on the question of Jerusalem, and looking forward to a continued collaboration until the Palestinian people have attained their inalienable rights. I will now deliver my remarks on behalf of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. Excellency Ambassador Sheikh Nyang, Chairman of the Committee, Excellency Mr. Fadi Hidmi, Minister of Al-Quds Affairs, Your Excellencies, I would like at the outset to commend the valuable efforts of the Committee on the exercise of the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people and the Chairman, Ambassador Sheikh Nyang, for co-organizing this second activity on the Palestinian youth in Jerusalem. This seminar is dedicated for debating the plight of the Palestinian youth living under occupation in East Jerusalem, who are exposed to continued Israeli occupations, illegal policies, and violations of their human rights. The seminar, therefore, represents an opportune occasion for sharing the needs, hardships, concerns, aspirations of Palestinian youth, and devising ways to build their capacities, enhancing their role in the society. I would like to express our appreciation for the principled position of all states explicitly rejecting the occupying power Israel's threat to annex parts of the Palestinian land occupied in 1967. Reiterate our rejection to this plan and consider it a blatant violation of the principles of international law, the United Nations Charter, and relevant United Nations resolutions, while emphasizing that the occupied city of Jerusalem is an integral part of the Palestinian territory occupied in 1967. I recall the strategic plan for the development of Jerusalem prepared by the State of Palestine, which was adopted by the OIC, detailing the needs, priorities, and possible interventions that would contribute to face up the challenges posed by the occupying power policies. and to promote resilience of the Palestinian people. The OIC in this regard have implemented some interventions through contributing in the development of the Palestinian educational sector and building the capacity of youth serving organizations in East Jerusalem with a view to improving youth's engagement in the delivery, effectiveness, and sustainability of the development process. The OIC also adopted a summit resolution on the socio-economic empowerment program for the Palestinian people with a view to promote steady and sustainable growth of the youth sector and contribute to creating work opportunities for youth in Palestine, particularly in East Jerusalem. Realizing the importance of the international cooperation and partnership in youth empowerment and development, I would like to highlight that winning between youth institutions in Al-Quds with their counterparts in the OIC member states, among other countries, would be an efficient tool to strengthen the steadfastness of Palestinian youth in their homeland and enhance their resilience. In closing, I would like to reiterate the unflinching support of the OIC to the Palestinian people in their struggle to regain their inalienable rights, including the right to return and to achieve the sovereignty of the State of Palestine on the borders of 1967 with East Jerusalem as its capital. In accordance with the relevant United Nations resolutions and the Arab Peace Initiative. I wish you all success in your deliberations and thank you for your kind attention. I would like now to request the representative of the State of Palestine, His Excellency Mr. Fadi Hidmi, Minister for Jerusalem Affairs, to deliver his remarks. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you, Ambassador Samir. Honorable Chairman, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, first I would like to salute you from the State of Palestine and from its capital, East Jerusalem, and to convey the greetings of His Excellency President Mahmoud Abbas and the Prime Minister Mohammed Shtayeh. I would also like to convey the greetings of our resilient youth who are standing firm in the land of the State of Palestine in spite of all the challenges and hardships they face. These young men and women are the future of Palestine and the protectors of the Palestinian heritage, history, and civilization, who are eager to see an end to the Israeli occupation and to live in dignity, safety, stability, and peace in an independent homeland. They dream and aspire, similar to other young people around the world, to have a brighter, more promising, just and peaceful future. I would also like to express my utmost appreciation to the Secretary General of the United Nations and the chairman and members of the UN Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People, and to the Organization of Islamic Cooperation for their constant support of the just Palestinian cause. They have been relentless in their efforts to enhance the realization of the Palestinian people's inalienable rights to ensure the establishment of a just and comprehensive peace in the Palestinian territories occupied since 1967, with East Jerusalem as its capital, to ensure security and stability in the Arab region. The conference comes at a crucial time when Israel, the occupying power, intensifies its crimes against the Palestinian people, justified by racist ideology that is unfortunately supported by the current American administration in a flagrant violation of international law. The Israeli occupation authorities are trying to establish a colonialist regime and erode the inalienable rights of our people and the norms of international law. Israel is planning to annex parts of the occupied Palestinian land, including Jerusalem, the Jordan Valley, areas north of the Dead Sea. The Israeli occupation authorities have also escalated their violations and measures in the holy city of Jerusalem and proceeded in its agenda to Judaize East Jerusalem while taking tangible measures on the ground to annex huge parts of the West Bank. Israel has furthered this demographic Judaization by continuing the excavation work under Al-Aqsa Mosque and within the walls of the Old City, by changing the features of Jerusalem, by expelling Palestinians from homes, by demolishing Palestinian homes under the pretext of lack of permits, by taking over Palestinian homes, and by implanting settlements inside the Palestinian neighborhoods. They have adopted land confiscation policy and forced displacement of Palestinians in order to change the demographics, the nature, and the status of the Palestinian occupied territories, including East Jerusalem. This is a flagrant violation of the norms of the international law, particularly the humanitarian international law, and direct violation of the UN Charter and resolutions, particularly the Concerned Security Council resolutions and the Arab Peace Initiative, including resolution that prohibit territorial acquisition and land confiscation by force. Israel has also escalated its violations and repressive measures against Palestinian Jerusalemites, particularly in Silwan, Jabal al-Mukabbir, and al-Isawiyah, and has been killing our Palestinian people in cold blood. The latest killing was the assassination of the son of Jerusalem, Iyad al-Hallaq, a Palestinian young man with special needs, who was murdered in cold blood in blatant violation of the norms of international law. As we are talking about annexation, Israel has approved, at the beginning of this year, the construction of 17,700 new settlement units in Jerusalem. I want to reiterate that the international community should not feel at ease with Israel freezing the annexation plan of parts of the West Bank. The Israeli measures taken on the ground do not indicate the freezing or changing the path of Palestinian land annexation. Israel is seeking to annex major settlement blocks in East Jerusalem, including the Ma'ali Adunim settlement block and the Gosh Atzion settlement block. This effectively eliminates any potential for establishing a Palestinian state in the West Bank with East Jerusalem as its capital by isolating the north of the West Bank from the south. Regarding home demolition, there has been an escalation in the policy of demolishing the homes of Palestinian Jerusalemites as a means of forced displacement. This is happening while the number of COVID-19 cases has increased among Palestinian Jerusalemites. The Israeli authorities have demolished since the beginning of the year more than 85 houses in the governorate of Jerusalem, among which the owners of 38 houses had to demolish their own houses by themselves to avoid high fines imposed by the Israeli occupation authorities. This has led to the expulsion of 180 Palestinians who became homeless. In addition, there are still another 105 home demolition orders to be executed. Honorable Chairman, since the beginning of the year, more than 1,200 Palestinians were arrested, of whom 90% are youth and 10% are children. Of the beginning of the year, more than 124 young men and women were banned from accessing Al-Aqsa Mosque it's worth mentioning that Israel has, since the beginning of the year, shut down many Palestinian institutions in Jerusalem. They also raided art and cultural centers that play an important role in the life of Palestinian youth by developing their music, theater, culture, art, and educational capacities. There is an urgent need to assist our youth to overcome all these challenges. The Palestinian youth have proven to the entire world that they are capable of being creative and of being agents of positive transformation. In return, the youth are expecting more attention from the United Nations. They are expecting the UN to bear its responsibilities and to alleviate the suffering caused by the Israeli occupation to Palestine. As for the youth in East Jerusalem, they comprise around 29.4% of the population there, along with the youth in other areas. They are affected by the Israeli oppression in all fields of life, including education, political and intellectual freedom, and sustainable development. On the ground, they face many challenges that push them into poverty, unemployment, and are always subjected to aggressions by Israeli occupation forces and settlers and lack of protection. This has resulted in a high level of hopelessness and frustration. This grim situation is further aggravated by poor social services provided by the occupying power, economic stagnation, and significant political and social tensions. Education is a crucial factor affecting youth in East Jerusalem. A total of 4 different school systems exist. The education in East Jerusalem shows the impact of the complex situation as a direct result of the occupation. Several challenges exist within the education sector as a result of the occupying power denial of the right of the Palestinian schools and universities to be renovated, let alone building new ones. The heavy-handed oppressive policies also impacted the curriculum, which is being forced to adopt the Israeli system. This culminated in higher school dropout rate among East Jerusalem youth, which may pose serious issues in the future. At the present time, youth in East Jerusalem face scarce employment opportunities, leading to a high unemployment rate. This has driven the youth from East Jerusalem to the Israeli labor market to work as non-professional workforce based on the lack of adequate education and vocational training opportunities. Consequently, economic growth is hampered by the Israeli practices, and East Jerusalem youth are faced with intolerable economic and social hardships as they are continuously falling under a high level of stress connected to the occupation, imprisonment, violence, and house demolitions. As for the tremendous cultural changes facing Jerusalem youth on a daily basis, they are confronted by attempts to undermine and eliminate their history and identity as Palestinians. Attempts have been put in place to isolate East Jerusalem and oppress Palestinian cultural heritage and identity in a systematic manner. Honorable Chairman, as we talk today on the annexation and many other ongoing Israeli violations, it's imperative to revitalize the international political will to put an end to the Israeli occupation of the Palestinian land and to save the two-state solution. It's imperative for the international community, particularly the Security Council, to undertake the responsibility in implementing the UN relevant resolutions and to overcome the double standard policy and state of chronic inability towards the Palestinian cause and Jerusalem. It's time to stand against the unjust American administration decisions that deny the Palestinian rights. Such unjust positions have only led to increased Israeli defiance of the international law and in continuing its illegal settlement projects. Israel has considered the American administration position as providing impunity for its actions. We call upon the international community to provide international protection for the Palestinian people in East Jerusalem and to bear its legal, humanitarian, and moral responsibilities to enable the Palestinian people to practice their inalienable rights, to recognize their ambitions, particularly the youth, who are the future of Palestine and our main partners, making a true lasting peace and building the Palestinian state with Jerusalem as its capital. Even before these grave violations, our young people have been very much influenced by the occupation. During youth and adolescence, human beings begin the transformation from childhood to adulthood, having to formulate their identities, beliefs, and behavior. Being exposed to high rates of violence and discrimination is extremely damaging during the formative part of life. In this context, there is a clear need to link human development interventions to the extremely complex environment of the occupied Palestinian territories. More than 20 years ago, women were very much part of the first Intifada, holding influential and important roles during that period. Women, young women and girls should be invested in and empowered. Their engagement in the socio-economic and political spheres is vital for Palestine's social fabric and economic growth. We call for actions to make youth safe and secure, have a decent work, meaningful engagement in society, and support a new generation of young leaders committed to the cause of freedom and justice. Thank you, Honorable Chairman, for giving me this opportunity to address your esteemed committee, and wish that you will reach an action plan to support the aspirations of the Palestinian youth in East Jerusalem. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Hidmi, for your remarks. We continue to stand by you and support the Palestinian people and will not rest until you have attained your inalienable rights completely and can live in a free and sovereign state of Palestine. Before we start, let me remind everyone that this event is being streamed live via the UN Web TV and the UN YouTube and Facebook channels. It is also being recorded and will be available for viewing at your convenience. I would like to give a warm welcome to the audience following us via different platforms. Everyone is also encouraged to tweet the hashtag for Palestine, Rights for Palestine. Following the initial remarks by our panelists, I will open the virtual floor for discussion. We will also be able to take some questions which member states can pose via the chat box function in WebEx, and the public can pose via the Facebook channel, Twitter, or WhatsApp at +1 646 421 0579. I would now like to give the floor to Ms. Reem Natsheh, the Field Work Coordinator in the Advocacy Unit of the Women's Center for Legal Aid and Counselling, WCLAC, in Jerusalem, focusing on highlighting human rights and humanitarian law violations committed by Israel against Palestinian women and girls, and on making their voices heard by the international community. Previously, Ms. Natsheh worked with the Lutheran World Federation as the Human Rights Project coordinator and on the empowerment of youth from East Jerusalem and the West Bank, and currently also serves as a board member of directors of the Jerusalem Center for Legal Aid and Human Rights, JLAC. Madam, you have the floor.
Thank you, Your Excellency. As a Palestinian female youth that was born and raised in Jerusalem, for 27 years, the only lived reality that I know is a prolonged illegal military occupation. There was not a day I've lived without having the occupation interfering in every aspect of my daily life. And I'm not the only one. I'm only one person out of thousands of youth sharing my same reality. We are talking about almost 30% of the Palestinian Jerusalemite population. Throughout the 53 years of illegal annexation, the Palestinian population of the Jerusalem has endured the hardship of Israeli control over every aspect of their lives. Guided by a goal of maintaining a Jewish demographic majority in Jerusalem, Israel has encouraged the construction of Israeli colonies and enacted policies that eroded the bond between Palestinian Jerusalemites and their home city. Israel's construction of the annexation wall and imposition of military checkpoints have further fragmented and burdened Palestinian communities in East Jerusalem, separating several Palestinian neighborhoods, including Kufr Aqab and Shafat refugee camp, from the city. Palestinians living in East Jerusalem are treated as second-class citizens by Israel, the occupying power, and are systematically discriminated against in a range of areas, including municipal services, residency rights, employment, healthcare, and education. They are confronted on a daily basis with the provoking of presence of the Israeli forces and settlers all over the city, and the unjustified excessive use of force, as well as attempts to marginalize their history and identity. Youth in particular are at the forefront of the struggle against the occupation when it comes to kills, injuries, arrests, and detentions. They are exposed to discrimination in almost every aspect of their daily life, denying their basic human rights. The life chances of Jerusalemite youth are remarkably limited by the lack of employment, opportunities, poverty, socioeconomic hardship, directly linked to the continued Israeli occupation and its associated policies. The situation is even exacerbated for Palestinian females in Jerusalem. Young women are affected by the combination of occupation and a patriarchal culture. They face a double oppression as their freedoms are doubly reduced as compared to men in every sphere of their lives, referred to the role of caretaker under a patriarchal structure and limited by occupation policies. Women's oppression often manifests in gender-based violence and limited choices. Palestinian girls and women across East Jerusalem find themselves living in the shadow of the occupation. The decisions they make about almost every part of their life, where to live, whom to marry, what career to pursue, are all constrained by the ongoing human rights crisis that dominates the life in the occupied Palestinian territory. While Israel's constant violations of human rights affects both male and females, females are disproportionately affected. For instance, in many different times following a violation, such as housing demolition or a killing or the arrest of the breadwinner in the family, women may be pushed into underpaid or low-skilled employment due to the financial pressure, which leaves them vulnerable to the maltreatment. From a gender perspective, Israeli continuous violation place enormous physical strain and stress upon women and girls. In many cases, women are left to bear the weight of these violations. Most commonly, when men are victims of the extrajudicial killings, arrest, or imprisonment, their wives and families are left to endure the consequences. This leaves women and girls in such situation at increased risk of poverty and homelessness. In addition, they are forced to tolerate the enormous pressure of supporting their families. Palestinian women in East Jerusalem also face the general constraints that have led to low living standards for all of the population, the annexation wall in the West Bank, and the discriminatory policies implemented by Israel, including those related to the delivery of basic services, land zoning, and planning, have contributed to the impoverishment of Palestinian women and their families. An estimated 76% of Palestinian adults and 83.4% of children in East Jerusalem live below the poverty line, compared to average poverty rate of 21.7% and 30% among children in Israel. Girls' right to education has been compromised by the military occupation and Israeli policies and practices, many of them in violation of international human rights law and international humanitarian law. Girls in East Jerusalem face specific constraints that limit their access to education. In a recent survey from a woman in Jerusalem, only half of the respondents had finished high school. Women who were interviewed reported several factors that led to dropping out of school. That include a lack of security in reaching school, for example, having checkpoints and completely having to confrontation with soldiers, and increasing rates also of early marriage. It is true that Palestinian youth in Jerusalem are socially isolated and disempowered, living in a protracted situation of distress, unease, restrictions, lack of opportunity, and struggle, including also often witnessing and being victims of violence and over-discrimination. Yet, despite being repeatedly exposed to arrests, violence, demolitions, collective punishments, and also attempts to remove them from the city, youth are persistently demanding their human rights and their right to exist. There are many youth activists and initiatives trying to mobilize for action and rights, but such initiatives are usually faced by oppression and complete shutdown by the Israeli occupation, let alone targeting the human rights defenders. The Palestinian civil society, while present and active in Jerusalem, lacks the political space and the resources, while demonstrating that they are capable and committed also to work in such devastating situation, their intervention is limited and hindered by the occupation. What Palestinian female, male, and youth are living through today is the result of a systematic lack of accountability. Israel has constantly failed to meet its obligations under international law as an occupying power, but instead, they has pursued a clear policy to pressure Palestinian Jerusalemites in order to force them out of the city or ultimately to immigrate. Today, I'm privileged to deliver my voice and the voices of youth in Jerusalem. However, if the Israeli occupation practices continues to exist with full enjoyment of the culture of impunity, I'm afraid there will be a time our voices won't be even heard. Thank you.
I thank Ms. Natsheh for her introductory remarks, and I would like now to give the floor to our next speaker, Mr. Micha Kurz, a community organizer in Jerusalem where he was active in youth movements. He co-founded Breaking the Silence, an organization of former Israeli soldiers speaking out about their service in the occupied Palestinian territory and denouncing the violations of the Israeli military. Mr. Kurz later co-founded Grassroots Jerusalem, a platform for Palestinian grassroots mobilization and networking with the goal of contributing to the creation and implementation of a Palestinian-led long-term development strategy. Mr. Kurz, you have the floor.
And thank you, Minister Hidmi and His Excellency from Senegal, and Ms. Natsheh and Ms. Watson. I'm honored and humbled to be part of this discussion. I appreciate Mr. Hidmi's description of the realities in Jerusalem and Ms. Natsheh's description of the realities that Palestinian youth live under. I think it is not for me probably to continue to describe these Palestinian realities, but instead to shed some light on Israeli realities today. And His Excellency from Senegal mentioned the two-state solution and the post-Oslo generation. And I'd like to speak to my generation, the Oslo generation itself. Growing up in the 90s during what we remember probably as the peace era, when we thought that peace was around the corner. I remember my mother watching the handshake between Prime Minister Rabin and Chairman Arafat, thinking that peace was around the corner. And what we as Israelis had experienced was a boost in economic development. The Malcha Mall was built, and new roads and new checkpoints were built across the West Bank that prohibited Palestinian economic development. What we thought was going to happen was a new Middle East. I made my way to the army, to my military service, thinking that this was the last time anybody would have to do that. And what I experienced at the military service was not protecting my borders, but instead, as you know, defending settlements in Jewish supremacist colonies in the midst of Palestinian cities in the West Bank. What I don't think we consider here is that the realities, the education system that we grew up in as Israelis teaches us Israelis that whether it's Pharaoh in our Passover Haggadah that we please excuse me. The realities today in Israel is that our Ministry of Education raises Israeli children to think that Palestinians are our enemies. From a very young age, we grow up in a militarized society, preparing for military and controlling the Palestinian population. We learn that Israel was a land without a people, waiting for a people without a land. I'm very sorry, hang on. I grew up from a very young age in uniform, joining the Israeli youth movements, preparing for Israeli military, and spent too much time the way most Israelis do, not knowing about Palestine. It is illegal practically these days to teach about about the Palestinian Nakba, the Palestinian catastrophe. And what I would like us to also realize is that Israelis, we don't talk about the Israeli wall and the new realities that what we call the Israeli security barrier had created across the West Bank in Tulkarem and Kalkile, and to the point that we're speaking today in Jerusalem, cutting the Palestinian workforce off from the central business district, making it almost impossible for Palestinian workforce to make it to work, causing massive unemployment and essentially no future for the largest Palestinian city and the largest Palestinian economy, the capital itself in Jerusalem. I would like a reality check when it comes to our discussions on the two-state solution, which was opened in the 90s as the rest of the world lifted, the Arab embargo was lifted, the Asian embargo was lifted, and allowed and enabled Israel to continue to grow economically, but at the same time did not hold Israel accountable to international law. I look forward to an interesting conversation with Rochelle and with Reem today to discuss how we might help member states hold Israel accountable to international law and to the resolutions that His Excellency from Senegal and Minister Hidmi had spoken to. Thank you very much.
I thank Mr. Kurz for his introductory remarks. Our third speaker today is Ms. Rochelle Watson, the national organizer and lead of campaigns for Friends of Sabeel North America, FUSNA, supporting Sabeel, an ecumenical movement founded by Palestinian Christians in the Holy Land. In her 20 years of experience as a community organizer, she was a project manager for Art Forces, a moral-based social change organization based in San Francisco, and co-founded the Olympia Rafah Sister City Project after her friend Rochelle Watson was killed in Gaza by Israeli security forces in 2003 while protecting a Palestinian home facing demolition. Madam, you have the floor.
Thank you, Ambassador. It is a pleasure to be invited to take part in today's conversation, and deep appreciation to the committee and organizers of this conference. Over 25 years ago, recognizing the power of theology as a liberating force, Indigenous Palestinian Christians created Sabeel, a liberation theology center in Jerusalem. 5 years later, Christians from the US started Friends of Sabeel North America, or FOSNA, recognizing not only do we as US citizens have a moral obligation to stand alongside those facing oppression, but we hold deep complicity in the oppression of the Palestinian people through the billions of dollars in military funding we provide Israel annually. The release of the 2009 Kairos document by Palestinian Christians to Christians around the world, a moment of truth, a word of faith, hope, and love from the heart of Palestinian suffering, strengthened our resolve to follow the call to take economic measures to help end the Israeli occupation. We see that our own liberation is tied to the freedom of the Palestinian people and all people. This is not only a theological sentiment, it is an economic, political, and military reality that the same actions that defend Palestinian rights are the ones necessary to uphold democracy, personal safety, and community well-being in the United States and around the world. Global systems of oppression exploit Black, Indigenous, people of color, queer, and other marginalized communities. As the youth in Jerusalem know too well, daily this looks like police brutality, mass incarceration and torture, forced displacement, surveillance and repression, denial of access to basic needs, militarized borders and refugee bans, military incursions, and the ability of corporations to profit off of the suffering. Recognizing these connections, I cannot speak of our work for justice for youth in Palestine without recognizing the intertwined justice struggles of Black youth in our own country. Since the murder of George Floyd, a Black man in Minneapolis at the hands of US police, the movement for Black lives has risen with renewed energy, and we uplift their call for a reorganizing of priorities, demanding divestment from police and militarism and a reinvestment of those resources into what our communities need, both here and in Palestine. When we come together to work for collective liberation, our diverse experiences provide us with the tools we need to dismantle systems of economic and social oppression and to create a world in which all people hold fundamental basic rights. American Christians have put this belief that all people are fully human into tremendous action for Palestinian justice. Grassroots networks dedicated to the work of justice in Palestine have emerged in dozens of Christian denominations in the United States. They have pushed their denominations to take critical action in response to Palestinian calls for costly solidarity. In June of 2014, the Presbyterian Church USA voted to divest $21 million from 3 corporations profiting off the Israeli occupation of Palestine after 8 years of advocacy and education within their church body. They were not the first or the last. Currently, almost 15 million Americans are members of a church or denominational group that has divested from companies profiting off of Israel's human rights abuses. Denominations have advocated strongly for the well-being of Palestinian children and youth. As a national endorser of the No Way to Treat a Child campaign, we saw individuals, churches, and denominations respond to the call to protect Palestinian children from the inhumane treatment of the Israeli military. As Israel has continued its land theft and apartheid practices, including the recent threat of formal annexation, the cry for fully ending US military funding to Israel is growing. Just this month, in the halls of the US Congress, a resolution conditioning military to aid to Israel has been introduced. Christians have joined with people of conscience across the country, telling our elected officials that anything less than sanctions in these times is unprincipled and insufficient. Unfortunately, as justice-centered Christian action has increased, so have the attempts to use our theology to justify Israel's abuses of Palestinian rights. The political and theological ideology of Christian Zionism is based on Eurocentric white supremacist beliefs that Israel must gather all the Jews of the world, enlarge its territory, destroy Muslim holy places, and ethnically cleanse the Holy Land of all non-Jews to hasten the desired end of the world. While most theologians consider it heresy, many Christians hold this far-right ideology without realizing its implications. Christian Zionist influence has been credited for the recent settler colonial policies upheld by my government, including moving the US consulate to Jerusalem and recognizing the Golan Heights as Israeli territory. These policies are a blatant attack against Palestinian justice and freedom and are not in alignment with Christian values. We understand liberation as giving voice to the prophetic leaders of a community to determine their own fate. There is nothing Christian about support for Israel based on racist interpretations of biblical birthright and prophecy. There's nothing Christian about support for Israel's blatant violations of human rights, apartheid policies, and military occupation. There's nothing Christian about denying people freedom. We call on Christians across the globe to speak out against this theology and help reclaim our faith-based principles of justice, equality, and freedom for all. We call on all persons of conscience to stand up against racism, ethno-supremacy of every kind, and colonialism in all its forms, and uplift a liberative Palestinian vision for the future. We are thankful for all that the UN member countries have done to work for justice in the region. Each action has ripples and strengthens our work. Please continue to take bold action for the youth of Jerusalem and all of Palestine. We must continue to heed the call for costly solidarity. Personally, as mentioned, I was brought into the struggle for Palestinian liberation in March 2003 by a dear friend who paid the costliest of solidarity. Rachel Corrie was run over by an Israeli military bulldozer in southern Gaza while bearing witness to an oppression she had just recently learned her role within. My grief has not gone away, but it has led me across borders, helped me to better understand the injustices in my own backyard, and renewed my faith in what's possible when we build bridges and more deeply understand our interrelatedness and our collective power. We lift up the demands of Freedom is the Future, a policy platform put together by Palestinians in the US, and demand that the US immediately end all military funding to Israel and other forms of military, economic, and diplomatic support until Israel upholds the rights of the Palestinian people and our vision of justice. Justice requires Palestinian self-determination, right of return, freedom for all Palestinians, the freedom to thrive, and the right to resist for a better world. To the youth of Jerusalem, we see you, we recognize what is happening to you and our country's role within it, and we won't stop taking action until all of us are free. Thank you.
I thank Ms. Watson for her introductory remarks. And I would like now to open the floor first to our panelists and His Excellency Minister Hidmi to pose questions and make supplementary interventions. Your Excellency Minister Hidmi, Mr. Kurz Ms. Natsheh and Ms. Watson, please be invited to use the raising hand tool here in the WebEx platforms. So if the panelists want to make extra comments, you have the floor. Then we move after that to Q&A and from member countries and then to the public. Is Minister Hidmi still around? Would like to make any comments?
Yes, thank you for all what we've heard, and but it's very important to stress that you know, Jerusalem Youth, we are in a stage where we are expected as officials, as a UN body, to deliver on the ground, because as also Ms. Reem Natsheh described, things are deteriorating severely on the ground with youth. And definitely we are in need of action on the ground. You know, when I described the demolition of Palestinian houses in Silwan, Aysawiyeh, Jabal al-Mukabbir, which has been taking place on a daily basis in Jerusalem, it's not just listing the numbers, but the stories that we live and we hear from the people being affected, the children, the youth, and also just to give you my, you know, I was detained as a minister of Jerusalem for my functions as a minister 4 times in less than a year. And when I went to the Russian compound for interrogation, I've seen in my eyes Aysawiyeh youth being humiliated and stopped, because in the Israeli mind, they believe that you know, they can use the stick in order to pressure the youth of Jerusalem to you know, to get rid and to not to speak the you know, the Palestinian language, and not to present their heritage. It's just, you know, and the identity. You know, now we are also in a fight, in a continuous fight, and the Jerusalem youth for their identity. So it's a serious situation where things are slipping and deterioration.
I'd like to appreciate Reem and Rochelle's input again. And Rochelle, thank you so much for such an articulate show of solidarity. I'd like to join my voice with you. I also would like to ask or bring up a question within our conversation as we open our panel, especially to Mr. Hidmi, and I'm not sure if His Excellency from Senegal, who spoke earlier, is part of this conversation, but we did frame our conversation within our 2-state solution peace negotiations that have been going on since I was a child. And to me, feel as an Israeli, especially listening to my politicians and sitting in you know, growing up in Israel, there aren't a lot of conversations about 2-state solutions at all anymore. There are very, very few Israeli parliament or Knesset members that discuss 2-state solutions. And if anybody's following Israeli politics, we know very clearly that this is not on the radar. And in the meantime, it provides Israel carte blanche to go ahead and continue settlement expansion and to continue to oppress Palestinians the way Minister Hidmi and Ms. Natsheh are describing. Within this framework, I wonder, is UN accountability to international law even possible? And again, I'd like to join my voice to Rochelle and Reem and Minister Hidmi in asking member states to, bottom line here, hold Israel accountable to the violations of international law that are quite obvious. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kurz. If the panelists would like to speak or to answer questions raised by Mr. Kurz, I now open the floor for questions from member states who express the wish to ask questions, and then we will turn to the panelists for their answers. I would like to kindly request member states focus their interventions on questions to the panelists, hopefully to elicit recommendations for our collective action. I will give the floor now to Ambassador Riyad Mansour, and after Riyad Mansour, I will give the floor to the Deputy Representative of Egypt. Please, Ambassador Riyad Mansour, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Samir, for chairing this very important second segment of the International Conference on Jerusalem, which, as you have indicated, has been taking place annually for the last 7 years. In this connection, in addition to what my brother, His Excellency Fadi Hidmi, Minister of Jerusalem, have said and expressed on behalf of the Palestinian people and their leadership, the appreciation for what the Committee on the exercise of the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people, headed by my twin brother, Ambassador Sheikh Niang of Senegal, and the collaboration with the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, represented by you, Brother Samir Bakr. We are very grateful for all the things that the committee has been doing over the years, and specifically in with regard to this conference, the collaboration with the OIC and the continuation of concentrating on the plight of the Palestinian people in Jerusalem, the question of Jerusalem in general, and advancing the cause of justice for the Palestinian people. We are very grateful for all of you for what you are doing. And the committee, which is composed of about 50 countries, half of them full members, other observers, which is a unique kind of a committee. It is the only committee of its kind now existing in the United Nations, empowered and mandated by the General Assembly to advance the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people. We are very grateful for what you all do and continuing to do until the Palestinian people attain all of their national rights. Also, I would like to express our gratitude to the Division on Palestinian Rights, headed by Elio Tamburi and his team, for dealing with all of the things that would make such conferences a successful one, in arranging the speakers, the technical support, all the other things that need and required to have meetings of this kind. We are grateful to them and we thank them. And also I want to thank my brother, Minister Hidmi for honoring us of being, with us and representing the position of the State of Palestine, the Palestinian people, and their leadership in Jerusalem. And I am delighted to hear all of the details that he has shared with us regarding the reality of the Palestinian people, particularly in Jerusalem, and the general scope that he added as well. And also I want to thank the young lady, Reem, who gave an outstanding expose of the reality of Palestinian youth to our audience. And we are also grateful for the thousands of audience who are following us through this method of conferences during the time of COVID-19. And also I want to thank the other two panelists, Mr. Kurz and Madam Watson, for sharing with us genuine and principled support to the cause of the Palestinian people. And these are two important examples of solidarity, genuine solidarity among the camp of peaceful forces within Israel that are interested in finding a just solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict on the basis of ending occupation and the exercise of self-determination for the Palestinian people, including through the independence of their state on the borders of 1967 with East Jerusalem as its capital, and the just solution to the refugee question on the basis of international law and relevant UN resolutions, including 194. And Madam Watson is sharing with us the pulse of what is really happening in the United States these days. We appreciate that. We know what is happening on the campuses and the universities and among the faith-based groups, the civil society organizations, and even within structures of the government, including Congress, whether in the House or members of the Senate, who are advocating, for the two-state solution and justice for the Palestinian people, and also identifying with the suffering of the Palestinian people, and people who are in the streets in the United States saying that Black Lives Matters. I think that they can relate to and understand that Palestinian life matter as well. So I don't want to dwell in the substance of the discussion, because I think that that is for the minister, to deal with it at this moment, and the other panelists. But I just want to say, while the main task of the Palestinian people and their leadership is to continue the struggle to put an end to occupation and to have the independence of our state on the borders of 1967 and Jerusalem, its capital. It is for us in the international community to continue defending the global consensus, which was demonstrated again 2 days ago in the Security Council debate, in which, while some were receiving the news, even the postponement of the annexation with some positive attitude, yet all of them emphasized and re-emphasized that nothing will be addressing the issue other than having a just solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And in the heart of that is the requirement of ending the occupation. In the heart of the two-state solution is ending the occupation. Therefore, there is still global consensus, and it is our collective duty to all of my colleagues from the different countries who are listening to us to continue defending the global consensus, to continue defending that Israel, the occupying power, has to end the occupation, and the inalienable national rights need to be fulfilled on the basis of the international law and Security Council resolution and other relevant resolutions of the United Nations, and also the terms of reference, the global terms of reference, which we all know, including the Arab Peace Initiative. This postponement of the annexation came as a result, on one hand, of the steadfastness of the Palestinian people and the firmness of their leadership, and on the other hand, the global unanimous rejection of all states, with the exception of two, Israel and the Trump administration. All of them rejected the illegal concept of annexation and succeeded in at least the stage of postponing it. And in the debate of the Security Council 2 days ago, and my brother from Indonesia is with us, he can testify to it. Indonesia is presiding over the Security Council for this month. All other speakers, with the exception of the representative of the United States, have indicated that annexation has to be abolished and removed completely and forever from the table, and it will never be accepted, and the two-state solution is the only possible option. As the Secretary General of the UN always say, there is no plan B for the two-state solution, which requires the end of occupation and the independence of the State of Palestine. Our duty at the international level is to defend this global consensus, not to be relaxed because of the so-called postponement of the annexation, to stay the course, to intensify our efforts until it becomes part of the past, never to be presented again, to be put on the table. But what should be put on the table is international law, Security Council resolutions, relevant UN resolutions, and the idea of ending occupation and the two-state solutions on the terms that we all know, and there is global consensus on them. And I think that for the Palestinian people and their leadership and their representative with us, Ambassador Hidmi, I think that our message from the international community that we will stay in the same course, hand in hand with the Palestinian people, until the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people to be accomplished. I think that that is the message that you can take from us. And our leader in this regard is Ambassador Niang. He is relentless in his principled position to advance the mandate of the committee as articulated by the General Assembly until the objective of the Palestinian people is achieved. And we are again grateful for all of you. We will continue doing things here at the United Nations in a creative way while we are continuing the march for fulfilling the goals and objectives of the Palestinian people to live in freedom and dignity in their own independent state. Thank you, my brother Samir. Thank you, Minister Hidmi, for being with us. And thank you very much, my brother Ambassador Niang, and all of my colleagues in the Bureau of the committee, and also the members of the committee and the observers of the committee. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ambassador Mansour. And I would like to give the floor to Deputy Permanent Representative of Egypt. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just checking, can you hear me?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to thank you for organizing this meeting in cooperation with the OIC and the esteemed panelists and participants who added their valuable insights and highlighted through their genuine experiences that peace is possible. Egypt further welcomes and thanks His Excellency Mr. Fadi Hidmi, Minister of Jerusalem Affairs of the State of Palestine. Mr. Chairman, Egypt continues to steadfastly support the implementation of a just, comprehensive, and permanent settlement of the Palestinian question. According to international law, UN resolutions, including Resolution 2334 of 2016, the Arab Peace Initiative, and the Land for Peace principle. Only through such a path can the legitimate aspirations of Palestinian youth be realized and the sacrifices that they have made and continue to make properly recognized and honored by securing a brighter future with the dignity that they rightfully deserve. Continue to support the work of this highly crucial committee towards that and ending the unjust occupation that the Palestinian people continue to suffer under. Mr. Chairman, let me take this opportunity as well to reiterate our position on Israel's annexation plans, which has been previously and repeatedly highlighted. Egypt reaffirms that this will jeopardize the two-state solution and represents a clear violation of international law, UN resolutions, and poses a grave threat to the prospects of peace and thus regional stability. Unilateral measures, violence, and bloodshed only serves to further complicate an already volatile and protracted situation, when what is required is agreement towards a just, comprehensive, and permanent settlement that fulfills, preserves, and respects the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people based upon international law and relevant UN resolutions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all the panelists, and thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Deputy Representative of Egypt. I will give the floor now to Deputy Representative of Indonesia, Ambassador Muhammad Kuba. Please, Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you, Excellency, and thank you also the panelists for the comprehensive and informative briefing. First, in itself, I would like to reiterate that, as a matter of principle, the settlement of the Palestinian question must be based on and fully respect all relevant UN resolutions and the internationally agreed parameters. On this note, I have a question about the youth. As in any other society, youth are important element in the Palestinian society, not only in its struggle to free from occupation, but most importantly as the main actor in social and economic development. With the latest threat of annexation, as well as the decision of the Palestinian Authority to cut its relations with Israel, how much this development impacts their livelihood, I mean the youth's livelihood, in terms of employment, economic activities, and education? And what kind of assistance are needed to empower this youth? I mean, how best we can support and assist this youth? Thank you, Excellency.
Thank you, Ambassador. May I now give the floor to representative of South Africa. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, and greetings to all the panelists and the colleagues. Mine is not a question, it's rather a comment to reiterate our position with respect to the Palestinian cause. But first and foremost, we wish to thank the chairpersons of the Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People and the OIC, the Organization for Islamic Cooperation, for co-hosting this important conference. Also, we would like to thank the briefers for their excellent and insightful statements, and also the personal accounts, the experiences on the ground, as put forward by some of the briefers. We're grateful for that. South Africa, as colleagues would know, we have stated on a number of occasions in the Security Council and in several platforms that there will be no peace initiative or peace plan that would have a merit to succeed if all parties are not invited to participate in such talks as equal partners from the start. In this regard, an initiative aimed at a solution to the Israeli occupation must take into account the needs and aspirations of the Palestinian people. The youth of Palestine form an important component of the Palestinian people, and we think that we believe that they yearn for peace so that their future can be guaranteed in the land they call home. Chairpersons, South Africa reiterates its position that it will continue to support the international efforts aimed at the establishment of a viable Palestinian state existing side by side with Israel within international recognized borders based on the existing based on those existing on 4 July 1967, with East Jerusalem as its capital, in line with all relevant United Nations resolutions, international law, and international agreed parameters. Chairperson, we also stress that an accountability mechanism must be put in place to ensure that commitments made are implemented and will lead to credible peace process. We continue to call for the implementation of Resolution 2234 and note that overt violations of UN Security Council resolution usually evoke stricter measures on the party responsible for this infringement. In this regard, as I conclude, Chairperson, South Africa calls for the release of all detainees and political prisoners, especially women, children, and the elderly. As I conclude, South Africa reiterates that the future of the region hangs in the balance and that the current actions could give way to further instability in an already fragile region. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you for your intervention, and I would like now to give the floor to the chairman of the committee and permanent representative of Senegal, Ambassador Nyang. Please, Excellency, you have the floor.
Yes, Ambassador Bak, thank you very much. I just wanted to take the floor very briefly. First of all, to pay my regards to the Minister of General Affairs of the State of Palestine, and also thank the panelists for the very insightful presentations. And I would like also to come to a question which has been asked by Mr. Kurz. First of all, I would like to thank him for being brave and taking the right positions. I think we need people like him within the Israeli society to really make the truth known and try to take the voice of reason, also the voice of peace, let's say the path for peace. And he asked a question saying that Israel, why Israel is not held accountable to international and UN resolutions. I will say that Israel, even if they try to deny the reality of the global consensus, they cannot destroy it. The global consensus is a very solid consensus. Every year it is renewed by international community, represented by states and the United Nations, and this is the basis upon which our committee is also functioning. So, so the lone actions and destructive strategy will not in any way, let's say, disrupt the global consensus we have. And this happened before. It has happened in Southern Africa, apartheid South Africa, in Namibia, in all countries where we have oppression. Always those regimes try to hold to positions which are not tenable at all. And I think we have to stay the course and make sure that the principles for which we are here to defend, those principles are held high. And I'm happy also, it's not only happening at the United Nations, but in other bodies, we are seeing actions being taken. At the Human Rights Council, at the ICC, at the Human Rights Council on the 43rd session, the Human Rights Council called for the Human Rights Commissioner to compile a report. So this shows that this is something which is not a joke, it's something which is very, very serious. And if you look at also what the ICC is doing, on the last December, the ICC announced that the probe would be launched regarding the situation of Palestine and to look at the alleged crimes which have been conducted at the OPT. That shows that Israel is held accountable, and we, as I say, we have to stay the course and stay mobilized, whatever the disruptions or distraction can be brought into this. So this is what I want to say very briefly. Sorry for taking the floor again. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency, for your clarifications and intervention. I would like now to give the floor to the panelists if they have any interventions. So I don't see any request from the panelists.
Yeah. I would like to go, if possible. And
Yes, sure.
responding, I will try to respond to the question from the ambassador from Indonesia. Thank you. Actually, what we were presenting is the daily reality of Palestinians in Jerusalem living in the already annexed areas. And what we also believe is that annexation, I mean, the coming released annexation or announced annexation won't be happening in one day. Annexation is actually been happening since 1967, and Israel had been long planning for such steps. If other places to be annexed, for example, the Jordan Valley, this would, of course, affect the Palestinian youth and also overall population economically. We're talking about the closure of many businesses and the destruction of many agricultural lands that we in Palestine, we mainly depend on for our economy. Even though we are struggling also, right now we are struggling with our economic, and the majority of Palestinian youth, they honestly choose to work in the Israeli labor because it is much payable for them. And we are currently facing a real difficult socio-economic hardship on the ground. So imagine that with also further annexation. This would, of course, exacerbate the situation, and it would make things worse. This would, of course, contribute in having an increase in the unemployment rates in Palestine and in all over the annexed areas. So that is my only comment about the question. And then going back to Micha's intervention and his question about one state, two state, and as there might be different point of views, and my respected country, the Palestinian government, are also different EU member states. They believe that also we must stick to the two-state solution. However, I'm just delivering what we youth actually are concerned about right now. I don't think that one state or two state is certain right now. We are really uncertain about these realities. But what we are really certain about is that right now we need the whole attention, the international attention, to be focused on us Palestinians, us youth, actually getting back our internationally recognized rights. Whatever or wherever this might be, including also to ensure the full implementation of international humanitarian law. I mean, we feel like we are disconnected, politically speaking, from what's happening on the ground. We are already busy surviving our daily lives in Jerusalem or in the West Bank or even in Gaza. So I think the reality of one state or two state, it's not even, we can't as youth right now imagine how a one state or a two state could be. So I think it is really important also to touch upon that, and mainly as His Excellency Ambassador Riyad Mansour, he mentioned that the root cause is occupation. So ending the occupation would be our own priority as youth and as Palestinians. And thank you.
Any other panelists would like to speak?
I'm happy to jump in, and Reem, thank you for if I may.
Yes, you have the floor.
Reem, thank you for those comments and clarifying that. I agree with you, and thank you, Your Excellency from Senegal, about your comments, reassuring hopefully international accountability towards international law. I appreciate, Reem, what you're saying regarding the bigger question of one state, two state, seeming more abstract is what I'm hearing you say than anything else. It really is. It doesn't make a difference when it comes to freedom of movement, unemployment numbers, dropout rates from schools, demolition, Israeli demolition policies on both sides of the wall. I think when it comes to these levels of accountability, I would like to think that in these forums on an international level, that it'd be important to remind the international community how important accountability really is to Israel. Right now, Israel is behaving obviously with impunity, and I think that is clear on our panel here, that we are clarifying that these realities have gone on. It's not this isn't this year's reality. This is this decade's reality and the previous decade's reality. And in the 90s, when we introduced the two-state solution, this was before the wall was built. This was before the bigger terminals and the Kalandia checkpoint and the Bethlehem checkpoint. And this reality became even more concrete within the reality of what we're calling the two-state solution, within which we are hoping to hold Israel accountable. I would like to remind us all that the post-Oslo generation, the post-peace generation, grew up with the walls and the separation even farther away from Palestinian realities. I speak of the Israeli youth, even farther away from Palestinian realities than the reality that I grew up with myself. And I grew up not knowing Palestinian youth. I only encountered Palestinian realities first in my military service, and later because I made a point of going out of my way and finding out what was going on under my nose. But for the most part, Israeli youth today will not have that opportunity by design. Israeli education ministry makes sure that we are taught a very specific narrative, that Palestinians are our enemies and that they need to be cleansed from our lands towards a full state of Israel from the river to the sea. That is where the Israeli government is leading us these days. And unless a much stronger international intervention happens very soon, one state or two state, I fear that Reem's, what Reem is describing, her fears of not having opportunities for Palestinian youth to raise families, to find a job, to send their children for a good education, and to grow a family within a liberty of a Palestinian state will never take place. And so I'd like to emphasize these points. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other speaker from the panelists?
I can comment.
Yes, please, you have the floor.
Just briefly on the question of one state, two state, I think just to share our perspective, which is that what we advocate for is Palestinian self-determination, and that whatever solution includes end of occupation, equality for all Palestinians, and justice for refugees, and is agreed to by Palestinians, we I see no need to defend the two-state or one-state solution, just to share that. And then the other piece, I think, just to bring that, I'm just curious. There seems to be consensus here and those who have spoken, but what does it look like for each of us to do what we can with our power to take a bolder stance than we've been taking? And what does it look like for us to break through barriers that are preventing us from bringing our collective power together, both within your countries and I worry, hearing Reem and recognizing the situation, and just in the 17 years I've been involved in this work, seeing how the impunity has grown and how the situation has worsened. Just feeling at a loss on how we all can collectively become bolder and impact this situation. As I outlined, we in the United States are doing everything we can to try to shift our government's stance and to push for an end to U.S. funding, to military funding. But it just all feels like not enough. Thanks.
Thank you.
Samir,
you have the floor, Ambassador.
if there are people that want to ask questions from outside the panelists, I yield to them. If you don't, I need to say two things.
Please, you go ahead. We don't have answers from the public.
Okay. Let me just say at the beginning that the fundamental question for the Palestinian people and the international community is to end occupation. We should not blur that question with abstract discussions over one state or two states. The fundamental question is to end occupation. And ending occupation is intertwined with the exercise of self-determination for the Palestinian people. It's the Palestinian people, once the occupation is finished, they will decide what to do with the land that belongs to them, which was occupied in the 4th of June of 1967, including East Jerusalem. Any discussion not to focus on ending the occupation, it will be, I'm sure, unintentionally by many. It's like condoning colonization, condoning the occupation. And therefore, it takes the Palestinian people into an impossible direction for the attainment of their rights. Once we end occupation and exercise self-determination, then the struggle among the Palestinians will be about the quality of life, freedoms, opportunities, equality, and all these issues, which will be dealt with only by the Palestinian people, because all people who exercise self-determination are the people who are concerned. Self-determination is the domain of the Palestinian people alone. It is not the domain of anyone, and definitely it is not the domain of the occupying power or their supporters in the Trump administration. So that's one issue. The other issue with regard to accountability. I think in terms of accountability, we came a long way, because we face in the Security Council, for example, instead of having resolutions under Chapter 7, which would include many things, including sanctions, the US administration would not allow resolutions to be adopted under Chapter 7. But I think that the collective struggle of the Palestinian people and the support of all of their friends everywhere allowed us to reach a moment where we changed our legal status in the UN system by being accepted as a state, although it's an observer state. And that allowed us and opened doors for us to join many things, including the ICC. Now, the ICC now is on the verge of starting an official investigations about crimes committed by the occupation against the Palestinian people, especially the continuing crime of colonization, settlements. So we are close to that, and that is a huge step in the directions of accountability. Another huge step in the directions of accountability, when we legislated Resolution 2334, we had a paragraph, operative paragraph 5, which calls for the differentiation in the dealings with countries, agencies, individuals, companies in the region, that they should differentiate between Israel on the border of 1967 and the occupied territory. That door, which has been slightly open, it would allow, hopefully in the future, for further opening of that door to take practical steps again to hold Israel accountable for the crimes committed against the Palestinian people and the violations of international law. Let me also add, in the directions of accountability, when we succeeded in the Council on Human Rights to have a list of companies that are violating international law and Security Council resolutions and conducting illegal business in the illegal settlements, that would allow also for the beginning of applying practical measures in the directions of accountability. And finally, it is a third state responsibilities. Countries like are friendly to us or friendly to justice, nobody would prevent them from taking steps in holding Israel, the occupying power, accountable for the crimes that they are committing. And I think that for civil society organizations who are very active in that field should be encouraged further to lobby their governments in order to take steps in their own domestic national court systems to go after those who violate international law, and in this case, the occupying power, and therefore open additional doors for accountability. Israel has to pay a price for the violation of international law, and that has to be a collective endeavor for all of us. For us at the UN to legislate, as I mentioned, for example, Resolution 2334. For you in the civil society, you have much more leeways and possibilities of including going to the national courts in your countries in order to sue those who are violating the law among the Israeli occupying power against the Palestinian people. This is how it was done with South Africa. We are not reinventing the wheel. We are learning from all these experiences. The Palestinian people are giving you the opportunity by their steadfastness, not leaving their homeland, not raising white flags. Even the frustrated Palestinians, including the Palestinian youth, as Reem has indicated, they are looking for ways in order really to continue their struggle against oppression, against discrimination, against occupation, against all the evil things that the Israeli occupation represent to the Palestinian people. So from our side, we are giving you the tools. From your side, do much more, double your efforts, be also creative as we are trying to be creative, to open new doors so that we can, all of us, add all these collective efforts to put an end to the occupation and to allow the Palestinian people to attain their inalienable rights. This is going to happen. I know that we are going through difficult times and we are frustrated, but yet we are optimistic people. Look at our people in Gaza. 2 million people living in a prison for the last 12 years. Do you see a single white flag? Shouldn't that inspire all of you that the Palestinian people are resilient, great, creative, they love life, they love to have freedom and to live in dignity in their own state? That should be inspiring to everyone, as you are inspiring us. Ms. Watson, when you talk about the things that you talked about, I am sure that that is also inspiring the Palestinian people who will listen to you. And Mr. Kurz, I'm sorry. I think that the things that you're doing and the more things that you will be doing, and also they are inspiring for us, that the Israeli society is not completely closed. That there are, maybe they are weak, maybe they are small, but there are forces that they are seeking peace. They respect the Palestinian people and their dignity and their life. And the more you do these things within the Israeli society, then I think that you will be concretely helping the Palestinian people to attain their rights. I think all these things are happening. Ambassador Niang, the ambassador of Senegal, spending significant portion of his time in advancing the cause of the Palestinian people. That's inspiring to me, inspiring to all of my Palestinian colleagues and all those in the committee and in the division. They have so many things to deal with for the interest of their countries. But when they give a significant portion of their time, their energy, their thinking to advance the cause of the Palestinian people, that is inspiring to us. And this is solidarity in action. And all these things put together with the OIC, all the countries of the OIC, and the things that they do to advance the cause of the Palestinian people. These are things are inspiring to us. And I think that this is how one day where Reem will be living in a better conditions that maybe me or the other fighters before her who are older than her, but we want to pave a way for her and for the Palestinian youth to live life better than our life, with dignity and freedom, raising their heads high in free Palestine, independent Palestine, where they will be the leader of future Palestine, and they can design it any way they wish in freedom and dignity. Sorry for taking the floor again, Brother Samir, but I felt that since the discussion is evolving into very fruitful and deep discussion, it is my duty to share my thoughts with you, and this is what I'm doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Riyad Mansour. And we have a question from the public. It's a viewer, Nadine Klopton, daughter of a Jewish refugee from the Soviet Union. She is partner of a Palestinian refugee, Mohsen, living in the US. The question, how can we make steps forward towards a future where Jewish youth are humanizing Palestinian youth and vice versa? Storytelling is critical, but Palestinian stories are often kept silenced. If any of the panelists or Ambassador Riyad would like to share your answer, or Minister Hidmi wants to make a comment. Okay, Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you, Ambassador Samir. I have two quick comments. First, I would like to reflect on when you mentioned the strategic plan for Jerusalem. Yes, the Israeli occupation is trying to keep us in a vicious circle of what they are creating on the ground. But we as a government, and of course by what Ambassador Samir mentioned, there is a plan that the President Office initiated 2 years ago. And as a government and as the Ministry of Jerusalem Affairs, we are following. We are moving forward also with youth issues. We have specific, projects, and we are in contact with the international community and with donors to make things materialize on the ground in terms of SME work and to support youth in IT projects. Because yes, we live in very difficult conditions that we all described and agreed upon, but we also fully aware that the Israelis want us also to be, the Israeli occupation power wants us to be in the passive mode and not thinking of how we can materialize our, specific projects on the ground for Jerusalem, including youth. Youth in our strategy is a cross-cutting issue, and I will be specific here just to give you an example. We have an issue with housing. It's very difficult to get a license or a permit to construct a new building in Jerusalem, and that's why people are pushed to build outside the apartheid wall, and because of also lack of financing and because of no banking system that can offer youth and newly married couples financial opportunities to buy an apartment. The cost of an apartment in Jerusalem will be on average $400,000. So what I'm giving these examples just to shed the light on also that we are, as part of the government work, we have what we call the cluster, the Jerusalem cluster program, where we are in partnership with the international community, and in spite of all the suffering that we face from the occupation on a daily basis, because we are very sure that they want us always to be in the vicious circle of being subject to demolition and arrest. But we are also, just to give you a hopeful note, we are also moving forward in that track. And also I want to reiterate what Ambassador Riyadh mentioned. We are in Jerusalem, we are here to stay. If you see the steadfastness of Jerusalemites, with all what we have, the gloomy picture that we have been describing. But I can assure you that we always unite in Jerusalem for our national cause issues. And here I will give you an example when, Jerusalemites, when one Qais Aburmele, a few months ago, who died because of the Israeli municipality negligence in one of the Palestinian neighborhoods. All Jerusalemites at that night went just to search for him. They didn't trust the Israeli police forces, but Jerusalemites took the initiative by themselves, and they went also even to Israeli neighborhoods in Navi Yaqub, just to send a message that we are, as Jerusalemites, united, and we don't trust the system in place. I'm giving this example to reiterate again what Ambassador Riyadh Mansour clarified, that we are here to stay in spite of the gloomy picture that we all described, and in spite of all the measures that we face on a daily basis. We have ideas to move forward. We are also thinking outside the box, but taking into consideration that the bottom line solution is ending occupation. Because even if we think for development, and we are with all the limitations resulting from occupation, we will face a huge difficulty in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Hidmi. Now I will give 1 minute for the panelists to, if they have any final remarks, and then we will conclude, because we are almost 7 o'clock, 12 o'clock New York time. So now, if any comments from the panelists, and then I will go to the concluding remarks. If no comments, then I will.
I'm happy to jump in here. I know we're running out of time.
Yes.
I'd like to first and foremost thank Mr. Mansour for, I guess, the hope that and reassurance that you're injecting our conversation with. And I agree with you 100% that it is not for me in any way to determine one state or two state. My job is to stand in solidarity with the Palestinian people and take leadership from those who are most impacted. And in this sense, I stand with Reem and the communities that Reem works with, and the women that Reem works with in Jerusalem, to take leadership from them and find out what is most important. If there were 2 issues or 3 issues that I'd like to put on the panel's radar as we speak before we conclude, it is that, yes, number 1, the international call to boycott, divest, and sanction Israel as an international campaign holding Israel accountable. It is, yes, I would ask that member states please lean into the BDS movement and support it. One of the biggest differences between Palestine and I think the equivalent of South Africa is that the ANC in South Africa could use the boycott movement as leverage at the negotiation table, but in our case, in Palestine's case, not as much. And it is crucial that member states boycott Israel and hold Israel accountable independently. And that probably opens a whole conversation. Still, one more point I would like to put on our table is that you mentioned the movement for Black lives in the United States, and the police oppression of people of color in the United States. I want to name that it is not a coincidence that the connection between the American police force and the Israeli military forces is clearly tight, as American police force come to train with Israeli military to learn how to control civilian populations. It is no coincidence then that a black man in America is treated the same way as a Palestinian man on the streets. And we must make those connections. We must make those connections also between Brazil or Hungary or Eritrea and Sudan, as Israeli military trains police forces across the world. And finally, I think it is important, again, to reiterate that the international solidarity movement learn to take leadership from Palestinian youth, and to learn and for Palestinian youth to be supported and for its voice to be highlighted in media. There's a comment in the chat from Sima Alami as the National Program Officer of a youth program in the UN Population Fund, that yes, the media needs to highlight Palestinian voices as much as it can. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Before I conclude, I will read the comment by Sima from Jerusalem. As a national program officer of a youth program at the UN Population Fund, there is an urgent need to engage the media outlets, focusing on international media to positively change the narrative of Palestinian youth and shed the light on their positive engagement and aspirations for a better life. It is time to convey not only the challenges faced by youth, but also the positive image for a new narrative. So this comment, I think the Minister of Jerusalem has heard it, and I think it's a positive comment. Any other comments from the Minister Hidmi or the panelists? Then we can say we are concluding we are very grateful to His Excellency Minister Hidmi.
Samir, I think the minister raised his hand, I thought.
Okay, Minister.
But I saw the minister, so.
Minister, you have the floor.
Yeah, very quickly, I would just like to thank you all for the genuine and sincere commitment to serving the needs and the aspirations and fulfilling the aspirations of the Jerusalem youth. So I appreciate all the comments that I've heard today, and the commitment. It's coming from your hearts, and I'm positive we will work all together to achieve the aspirations of our great youth in Jerusalem. Thanks all.
Thank you. Riyad, you raised your hand. You want to speak or?
I don't want to speak, I identify with them, but if Reem wants to say something, her body language is saying that she wants to say something. I'd like to hear something from her.
Thank you. I really wanted to thank everyone, and also it gives me hope to hear also how much Palestinian youth are still a priority for our respective government and also for the UN different bodies. And I totally agree with Sima, and we have many also examples of a very promising young Palestinian youth in Jerusalem, in Gaza, and in West Bank. And I totally agree that we should work on how to deliver their voices also to the international community. It is true that suffering and occupation is, our lived reality, but we're talking about people, their lives, and also we're talking about their dreams, their ambitions, and their hopes. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, and we have to wrap up. We are very grateful to His Excellency Minister Hidmi, Mr. Kurz, Ms. Natsheh, and Ms. Watson for taking the time to participate in this meeting, sharing important information and their insights, and answering our questions. Our organizations will continue to take action collectively and in national capacity to highlight that East Jerusalem has been living under occupation and annexation for decades, and that the situation there must be urgently addressed. Before I conclude, I would like to thank the participants and audience, the members and observers of the United Nations Palestinian Rights Committee and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, the wider international community, civil society, and the public at large for participating in today's conference. I would like to remind everyone that a recording of this meeting will be shortly uploaded on the web page of the committee www.un.org Unicipal, where you will be able to learn more about the question of Palestine and the work of the committee and upcoming events. And on our YouTube page, I herewith declare closed the second part of the 2020 International Conference on the question of Jerusalem. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you
very much.
All the best.
Thank you, Excellencies. Thank you, colleagues.
To all of you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Free, free Palestine.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye, Riyadh.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Minister. Bye, Samir.
Bye.
Reem. Bye, Micha.
Yes.
Bye, Ms. Watson. Hi, May, everyone. Thank you.
Good to meet you, Mr. Mansour. Thank you.
Okay. Work harder.
You too. We do it together.
Okay. Bye-bye.